GSVM Cito founder interviews are back, and today we're starting off with a screamer. I have Vijay, the CEO of Eclipse, with me today. Eclipse is the first L2 in Ethereum that uses the Solana virtual machine SVM for execution and uses Celestia for data availability. This setup combines Ethereum's security and liquidity with Solana's speed, enabled by parallelized execution and sub-second finality. Eclipse has recorded over 3,600 transactions per second and over 9,000 at the peak for a short time with the TurboTap game, and is still to date one of the largest consumer, actually the largest consumer of Celestia's DA layer. Me personally, I am an investor, for full disclosure, into Eclipse since 2022. Vijay, who has a strong background in TradFi, he's been working with BlackRock, then joined crypto in 2015 to work at Ripple, and also he's been involved with the launch of dYdX and also part of Uniswap. So Vijay is the man, and I'm very excited for this conversation. I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and also give this a like and retweet if you're watching on X. Solana and Ethereum, the first Ethereum SVM enabled L2, also the fastest L2, with many successful applications, a thriving ecosystem, a vibrant and a live community, which is something that's very rare in crypto. And I'm excited to have with me today Vijay, the CEO of Eclipse. Vijay, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. How's it going?
Good. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Cito.
Yeah, so I've actually covered Eclipse since 2.5 years pretty much. And one of the things that I also just mentioned that I think is very, very impressive is how you guys managed to build up not only a loyal community, but also to attract liquidity and also attract quality applications, right? So Orca is deployed in Eclipse, many DeFi applications, many games as well. Some of them are highly addictive, not gonna lie. I've played a lot of them, and I've also been a turbo tapper. And yeah, because usually the thing is in crypto that you see a lot of projects, they first come up with the token, then they announce a massive airdrop, and then they try to build out an ecosystem, hoping that they would also build a community out of that, right? But you've kind of done it the other way around, which is actually the right way to go about it. So I'm just curious on your comments, thoughts on this kind of strategy, and yeah, how it turned out for you so far.
Yeah. So it always felt like the right strategy to us, right? To launch the product first, grow the ecosystem, community, and then the token is something that was considered later, right? As an accelerator to the growth of all that. And, I think that was really like how crypto started, how crypto was in like DeFi summer, like 2020, 2021, 22, like that kind of, I think, what I consider to be kind of a golden era for crypto. And then I think somewhere along the way, the last couple of years, it's like shifted to this narrative or meta of like launch a token first and the product later. So we always felt, I'd say Eclipse has always taken like a unique approach of doing things that are counter or just orthogonal to what is happening in the broader space. And so this felt like not only the right approach, but also one that was kind of counter to the accepted playbook. And I think it's really worked out for the better for the Eclipse ecosystem, right? Because it's given us a chance to really build a strong core community. And, of course, you still have airdrop farmers who come, but, I think compared to a lot of other communities, Eclipse really has a very strong and united core that's been engaging with the product since day one. And so it gives us a chance to really build that, a chance to really dog food and test a wide range of applications and figure out product market fit, what the right growth strategy for apps is, and then accelerate things, right? So we're not kind of under pressure of having to meet the market expectations for a liquid token, which are quite more complex and I think just a complicating factor in terms of actually building a core product. So it's really given us a chance to figure that out and then and go from there, right? So it's really paid off, and I think it's given us a chance to bring a lot of great apps to life, and also to continue to incubate a cohort of apps that will be coming live over the next few months as well. So I think having that room to be creative and to test things has been invaluable to the long-term trajectory of Eclipse.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of things that other founders can take note from and also learn from the go-to-market and what you just mentioned. One of the things that I also found really cool is the kind of gamification of Eclipse and specifically TurboTap, right? Initially, when I started tapping, I just thought like, man, this is stupid, just clicking on a cow and like you get these points. But then you started to do these missions, provide liquidity, playing games, and get more points, right? And there's a leaderboard and all these kind of things. So you really optimized gamification, not only to build a loyal and engaged community, but also to really stress test the technology and stress test the chain, right? And some of the numbers I already mentioned are very, very impressive. But on a higher level, what would you say is Eclipse optimized for? Because I think there were a lot of games, right? And obviously there's an underlying DeFi layer and liquidity layer. But would you say that Eclipse is optimized for a specific vertical or niche, like gaming, for example?
Yeah. So in terms of Eclipse, the technology, you can build anything, right? And we've had a variety of builders across all the use cases come to us. In terms of where we've really dedicated our focus and where we think there's a lot of product market fit long term, it's in the realm of what we're calling financialized consumer, or kind of hyper financialized consumer, which includes elements of gaming. So there's a lot of these viral kind of overnight virality type games that are quite popular these days, even outside of Web 2. And that kind of archetype of gameplay paired with the social element is really something that we think is a powerful just engagement engine and something that people and users really enjoy. And so that's the area that we've specifically focused on, right? And there's kind of a variety of kind of subspaces in that, right? So, for example, one of the marquee games on Eclipse that's seen a tremendous amount of usage is this game called Worm, which is basically a Slither-like game that hit 10K weekly average users in under a month, and it has a 30-day retention of 47%, right? And there's no token; it's all organic usage, and so that's more like a pure play game, right? It kind of harkens back to Snake in like the early days of mobile gaming, and on the other hand, there's kind of games that have that gameplay dynamic, but with a little bit more of a social and leaderboard element as well, as we saw with TurboTap. And then there's other games that lean much more heavily into the social dynamic, right? And are a bit more like kind of the archetype that we saw with Frentech, where the social piece is really centric to it. So there's kind of a variety of different approaches under that bucket of financialized consumer, but that's really something that we think Eclipse can really dominate in and has already due to the capabilities of the chain, right? So being able to support an order of magnitude higher throughput and transactions per second than we've seen to date, as well as with an extremely low cost per transaction to post data thanks to using Celestia for DA, right? So that combination is very powerful, and the research roadmap that we're executing on allows us to continue to drive performance improvements, moving towards even 1 million plus TPS over time through hardware-based improvements, and then continuing to build on top of Celestia and being a part of their mammoth roadmap and beyond. That allows us to continue to support dozens and then eventually hundreds of these high performance, hyper financialized consumer type games and apps. So that's really where we're placing a lot of our bets, and there's a lot more coming that will highlight the capability of Eclipse that fall under this vertical. And beyond that, in terms of like where the Eclipse roadmap is going, we think it's really well suited to a variety of other use cases as well, right? So high throughput DeFi, specifically central limit order books, is an area that we have some upcoming developments in that we'll share. And then beyond that, DePIN and robotics are areas that we think are very interesting as well, because there's, I'd say right now those use cases are in their very kind of early days of infancy, and they require really product focused teams first and foremost, right? But that real world coordination element, especially as we start to move into like millions of like edge network type transactions, that per second, that's an area that we think Eclipse can really stand out in as well longer term. But for the next year, there'll be a lot more apps that kind of highlight this financialized consumer use case angle.
Yeah, you also mentioned Celestia a couple of times, and that's a project we've been covering here since late 2021. So what was the kind of thought process or decision making behind going with Celestia for your DA layer versus something like Avail or EigenDX, for example? And I'm not sure what other options are on the market right now, but why Celestia?
Yeah. So there's kind of a few key reasons there. So I'd say first and foremost, Celestia has the longest track record and executing in production. That meant a lot to us in the early days of DA, right, or modular DA, because that space was still very early on when Eclipse was getting started approximately 2 years ago, and having a production ready, battle tested infrastructure to underlie the DA piece was extremely important to us. So having a track record with Celestia there and kind of very thoughtful go to market and launch a mainnet was extremely important. Second is just in terms of the roadmap and economics, Celestia is moving in a direction that really will continue to support the capabilities that Eclipse needs in terms of publishing data with the Mammoth roadmap, and other things that the team is doing there. We have no doubt that that will be sufficient to continue to support the growth of Eclipse activity and the ecosystem and the publishing needs that we have. And then lastly, also, I think is the team and the quality of the team there, where we've been working with them for a long time, and there's a lot of strong kind of collaboration and relationship there as well. But of course, now there's other DA players out there, and I think the DA space will continue to be competitive, and there'll be a lot more performance improvements coming there. So that's something that we're keeping up with, but the Celestia team continues to stay at the forefront of that as well.
Yeah, and here on this channel, we're pretty Cosmos centric, right? We've been covering Cosmos since late 2020, and Cosmos really stands for the philosophy of sovereignty and interoperability in the end of the day, right? With IBC being the flagship interoperability protocol. And as far as I'm aware, currently there's no native integration or connection of IBC on Eclipse, right? I think it's enabled right now through Hyperlane, or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and do you have plans to, in the future, maybe directly integrate IBC on a native layer?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're considering, and should happen in the near future.
Yeah, nice. Cosmonauts, I think, will be pleased to hear that. But yeah, there's probably a million things on your plate right now, and you're cooking on all ends. One of the more recent launches that actually just happened was the launch of your native stable token tUSD. Can you maybe walk us through the thought process of why tUSD exists in the first place and what people and users can do with it?
Yeah. So tUSD is the yield-bearing stablecoin for Eclipse. So effectively, you can deposit other stables like USDC and mint tUSD, and that experience is powered by Nucleus. So yield-bearing stablecoins, I think, just zooming out, is like a very powerful trend more broadly, right? There's a variety of different approaches to doing it, but it's becoming more table stakes for stablecoins to generate some type of yield, right? And I think this is something that we haven't seen as much of in traditional stablecoins like USDC and USDT, but with the rise of RWAs and just the whole ecosystem around that, and TradFi players coming in as well, I think that's really pushing us towards this new paradigm, and users are now expecting to be able to earn on their stable coins as well, right? So, that's where the market is moving. So I think it's important to meet that need. And then, if there's user interest in maximizing yield and return on assets, then that also provides an interesting opportunity for asset consolidation, right? Or concentrating liquidity around certain assets. So of course, USDC and USDT will continue to be extremely popular, but providing a solution here and potentially even down the line directing incentives at that is a way to have users consolidate stablecoin inventory into an asset like this, where they can earn that yield, and so they're interested in doing that. And I think eventually the market will move in this direction. So we think it's an opportunity to kind of drive that network effect and activity early on, and also provide something that is not extremely widespread yet, right? So super excited about it. It's been it just went live, so we're starting to see users onboard to it, and Hyperlane is supporting it as well.
Yeah, I haven't actually done that. I still got to do this, but I did get some bits though, and I also put them into staking. What is actually the story of bits?
Yeah. So Bitz is a really interesting experiment. It's largely a community-run project, which the Eclipse team is helping to support. And effectively, it's a fair mining protocol, right? So users can come in and mine even on their computers, so very accessible. And there's a command line type interface where they can do that. And so if you're familiar with Ore on Solana, this is akin to that. And I think it really is an interesting way to also continue to battle test the capabilities of the network and generate some really interesting community dynamics and interactions, right? Where everything we do at Eclipse, we want to, one, highlight the capabilities of the chain and what is only possible on Eclipse, and two is continue to invest in the community and ecosystem, right, and help to really accelerate and elevate those dynamics. And so, uh, Bits is something that has really achieved that, and I think continue to drive that type of user activity and interest that we saw with TurboTap early on. And it's also been, I think from a metric standpoint, I believe over 2/3 of Bits is currently being staked, and I think there's really kind of this strong community alignment in terms of how the miners and community think about the token and uh, continuing to hold for the long term. So it started out as a bit of like a proof of concept, and I think it's really taken on a life of its own and uh,
Mm.
continue to drive these community dynamics as well as just highlighting what's possible.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. You already have your flagship kind of community token. You also have your flagship NFT collection, right, with the After the School Club NFTs. And I think a lot of the moving pieces are all coming together. And that's also probably one of the main differences to all the other L1s or even L2s that are launching or that already have launched recently. Because I think right now in crypto, we're at a point, especially in the altcoin market, where we have a bit of an oversupply of block space, oversupply of coins, and a lot of empty chains, right? They don't really have any economic activities. So I'm wondering, in the kind of mid-term, long-term, what is your game plan to really strengthen your position, right? Because usually in crypto, life cycles are very brutal sometimes. And I guess, yeah, my question is, what is your strategy to keep up that momentum that you currently have and have built up over the past 2 years?
Yeah, yeah, especially in today's crypto environment. I think with the saturation of tokens and projects too, it's become kind of this attention machine, right? And so that's also driven incentives towards this kind of um, very marketing pump heavy strategy, launching the token first type strategy that teams have kind of coalesced around. I think the key now is like the pendulum is swinging back, right? Where it's the focus is returning to apps and to end user value value creation for those end users, for developers. And so just continuing to like really drive value to those audiences can really be a differentiator, right? So like it's almost a return to fundamentals where the key questions are, what are the interesting apps? Do those apps provide value to end users? And do they generate revenue? And then for developers, it's, does the chain meet their needs in terms of designing a product and the key product considerations, right? So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about what Eclipse is doing on both those fronts. So in terms of developers, I think right now the crux of the developer choice is, do they deploy to a general purpose, either L1 or L2, or do they go with an app chain or app specific rollup, right? And the reasons to do that are, one, to be unconstrained in terms of performance needs, right? And this is very frequently something you see with order books like dYdX, which I previously helped to launch, or Hyperliquid, where they tend to go into their own own garden, right, or operating environment. And we also saw this with Uniswap, with Unichain. So there's kind of this trend towards going to an app chain or app specific rollup to not be constrained in performance, right? And Cosmos has been a beneficiary of a lot of that. And, I think there's definitely a case for that in certain situations, right? And then the other piece of it is that motivates developers to move to kind of their own environment is to capture the economics that they're generating, right? So in the case of Uniswap, where I previously was as well, there's this thinking of capturing more of the sequencer level value and also using that to kind of build out a separate app ecosystem, right? And that generates more economic value. In the case of dYdX or perps dexes, to capture the full value of the trading activity that was happening, right? As opposed to a lot of the economic value going to non non-participants in the product itself, right? So you kind of have this economic consideration as well, and a desire to capture that. So those are the two of the key reasons I think that you see developers going into app chains or app specific rollups, right? So what we've done with Eclipse is we've prioritized functionality that essentially achieves those same outcomes and allows developers to build unconstrained apps where they capture the economics in a general purpose environment, right? Because ultimately there's a lot of value to shared liquidity, and 99% of apps out there benefit from that shared liquidity, right? Of course, early stage apps, but also even mature apps, like there's a lot of value to being in this common kind of liquidity environment. And so in terms of the Eclipse roadmap, we achieve that by continuing to drive performance improvements and making it so that you can have multiple concurrent hotspots that are seeing tremendous usage, right? And of course, Eclipse uses the Solana VM, and Solana has been able to support this from day one, where you have multiple apps that are seeing a tremendous amount of usage, right? Now, Eclipse as a layer two can go even further because we're not subject to the requirements of a decentralized validator set, right? So we can drive even further performance improvements as a layer two. And then on the economics piece, what we've done is prioritized MEV redistribution, which returns network level value to app developers as well as users and token holders. So apps accrue the portion of the network value that they're creating. So that effectively allows apps to own their own economics, right? And then we're also pairing that with work on application specific sequencing, which gives apps that sequencer level customization that they also want, right? So these three things, performance improvements, MEV redistribution, and application specific sequencing, provide effectively the benefits that you get by going to an app chain or app specific rollup within the Eclipse general purpose environment. So that's how we're solving for developers' needs. And then on the end user side, it's about using those capabilities to create apps that are really attractive to these end users and engage them, right? And I think we've seen some early wins here, but continuing to really foster this ecosystem of consumer-centric apps with kind of a base of DeFi, and really creating things that allow users to kind of capture a portion of that value as well, either via fees and fee redistribution or with the tokens that those apps launch, right? So I think just returning to fundamentals and giving developers what they want and users what they want is the North Star here. And that's how we plan to continue to preserve that momentum, going back to your question, right? Where it's putting those things out there and continuing to do that at a steady cadence is what will differentiate Eclipse long term, and not just a token, right?
Yeah, return to fundamentals is a good one. And I think as a cosmonaut, that's also something that we deserve or are looking forward to, at least in our ecosystem, because Cosmos is probably one of the most innovative pioneers in crypto and Web3. And but has been suffering a bit over the past years when it comes to momentum and traction. But now there's a lot of exciting things happening in Cosmos as well. And yeah, I would love to see how Eclipse and Cosmos are more converging. One of the things that's obviously not public yet, there's no public information or a concrete timeline, but is the role and the launch of the ES token that is coming soon. But yeah, can you maybe speak on a higher level on its role for the Eclipse ecosystem, also general value accrual mechanisms, and just overall how it fits into Eclipse? And also, I'll have to ask you that the TGE plans and where we are right now with the launch.
Yeah. So in terms of timelines, so the ES token is coming in the near future. We'll communicate more about timelines from official accounts over the coming weeks, but some more to come there. What I'll say is right now, probably the next key updates to look forward to are the airdrop checker and an update on the tokenomics. So those are coming in the near future. And then in terms of the tokenomics and kind of the function of the token itself, so initially on day one, it functions as a governance token, right? Where governance will be rolled out in the coming months as well, and it provides users and community a chance to have a say on the protocol, right? But there's a variety of other features that the core engineering team is building that can be rolled out over time as well, right? So including supporting ES as a gas token and not just ETH. And then there could also be staking functionalities along with fee redistribution going to token holders, right? So these are a few examples of things that the ecosystem is considering. But the rollout of these things would be subject, of course, to governance itself and implementation by the Eclipse Foundation that's launching the ES token. So there's definitely a variety of exciting things coming down the pipe in terms of the token. So we'll definitely keep the community posted. And of course, I think there's been a tremendous amount of kind of interest, and I think everybody is watching like hawks right now for updates on tokenomics. So we definitely hear the community, and more to come up on that.
Yeah, definitely hearing that, and thanks for sharing. I will be keeping the community posted here also on this channel. And yeah, also one of the things that some community members have asked me to ask you is about manual reviews, right? Because some of the tappers that were tapping like crazy, they got flagged as potential bot activities. So yeah, how long is that review still going, and how do people know when or if they are still under review?
Yeah, so on this, I think the best way to know is the airdrop checker, as kind of just the way that will let the community know what the airdrop allocation is. So the Eclipse Foundation will publish that, and in terms of the review, we're going through a thoughtful process to make sure that we're capturing kind of the right kind of activity and ecosystem aligned activity. And I can't say too much about the specifics there, but we're definitely being thoughtful about that.
Fair enough. And yeah, one last question that's probably the least talked about or most overlooked topic in all of crypto, which is the social layer, right? The behind the scenes, the team dynamic, the internals. And you're now being the CEO for, I think, around a year or something like that, a year and a half, right? So, what is your top learning over the past year? And maybe you can give us an insight on how it's been for you personally, for the team, and kind of all the internals behind the scenes that the community might not see publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, I think a lot that we've learned as a team, a lot that I've learned personally. I think to highlight a few of the key things, right? I think team is everything, right? Team and core community is everything. And so really growing that in a thoughtful way and building out a high trust team that is extremely capable and high kind of agency, I think is the highest leverage thing that you can do, right? And we've very intentionally grown the Eclipse team and hired domain experts who are very capable in their role and their function. And we've spent a lot of time to find the right people to do that, right? Including the use of work trials where people come in and work with the team on a project for a day as a way for both sides to figure out the fit. And so we've really been able to create a high performance culture aligned team. And I think that's kind of rippled out into the core community and ecosystem as well, especially with the work that Alucard is doing on the community side, Ren and team are doing on the ecosystem side. And, we've been able to sort of build that cohesive identity, which I think is really important long term to continue to be on the right trajectory, right? So I think that's definitely an important thing. I think another thing is, we're really in a marathon, right? And I think a lot of the token before product playbook or like kind of the heavy CT kind of CT posting sprints, like a lot of the playbook has kind of the industry playbook has coalesced, I think, around this like idea of like an overnight kind of an overnight pump or success, right? But I think it's really about building like a durable long-term ecosystem and system and putting in the bricks brick by brick that's required to make that happen, right? And I think we're sort of seeing the market shake out a bit where teams that are doing that are definitely seeing outsized returns and value, whereas teams that try and play the old playbook, there tends to be like a crash and burn or eventually like momentum fizzles. So you have to really consider that like marathon, right? And like playing the long game because it's an oscillating line around an upward trend line, right? But there are going to be those troughs and valleys. So I think really thinking about how do you build durable systems. And one example of this is in terms of Twitter marketing by the Eclipse team, right? So we do a lot of team-led marketing where everybody on the Eclipse team has a voice on Twitter and it's kind of a distinct voice, right? So it allows us to create a cohesive kind of cast of characters and along with the community that provides a really powerful kind of marketing and community engine for the Eclipse ecosystem. So that's another thing. And then, the last thing I'll say is like, I think there's a lot of market pressure sometimes to take shortcuts, right? But as a team, we've been very firm in doing things the right way, doing as much as possible for the community and developers, even if it's kind of the longer or harder path. And I think eventually that always pays off. I've been operating crypto for 10 years now, and I feel like every cycle this continues to be the takeaway and lesson. So it just requires kind of a certain like longer duration horizon, a little more patience, like because sometimes it can feel like the longer path or the harder path, but I think it's always the path that wins and is the right path long term. And I think there's a lot of community and builders in the Eclipse ecosystem that see that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Vijay. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for all the insights. And all the best for the coming weeks. And hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for having me, Cito.